"We gave your wedding money to your sister. She deserves the attention more than you," my dad announced, standing in the middle of the living room like he had just delivered some profound wisdom that should be met with gratitude and applause. His arms were crossed over his chest in that familiar posture of authority he always adopted when making decisions about my life without my input. My mother sat beside him on the floral couch, nodding along as though this made perfect sense, as though stealing $40,000 from one daughter to give to another was simply responsible parenting. I stood frozen in the doorway, my fiancé Ethan's hand warm against the small of my back. The words echoed in my head, refusing to form into anything coherent. $40,000. My grandmother's final gift to me, the money she had set aside specifically for my wedding, the inheritance she had made my parents promise to protect. Gone. Given to my sister Vanessa, who stood in the kitchen doorway with a small smile playing at the corners of her lips, watching my reaction like it was entertainment. "What did you just say?" My voice came out barely above a whisper. "Your sister is getting married next spring," my mother explained with exaggerated patience, as if I were a child who needed simple concepts broken down into digestible pieces. Her fiancé's family is not as financially comfortable as Ethan's. It only makes sense that we help them have the wedding they deserve. You understand, do not you, Isabella? I turned to look at Ethan, searching his face for some indication of how to respond to this insanity. His expression was calm, almost unnervingly so, but I had been with him long enough to recognize the tension in his jaw, the slight narrowing of his eyes that meant he was carefully controlling his anger. "They have 96 hours, Ethan said, his voice measured and controlled. "No more." My father blinked, his confident posture faltering slightly. "Excuse me?" 96 hours to return every cent of Isabella's inheritance to her account. After that window closes, the consequences will be entirely of your own making. Vanessa laughed from the kitchen doorway, a sharp, mocking sound that cut through the tension. "Who do you think you are? You cannot just come into our parents' house and threaten them." Ethan did not even glance in her direction. His eyes remained fixed on my father. "This is not a threat, Mr. Henderson. It is a courtesy. 96 hours is more than generous given what you have done. I suggest you use that time wisely." My mother stood up, her face flushing with indignation, the pearls around her neck catching the lamplight as she drew herself up to her full height. "Now you listen here, young man. We have been nothing but welcoming to you. We have accepted you into this family, treated you like a son. You do not get to come into our home and make demands." "I am not making demands," Ethan replied, his tone never rising above conversational. "I am simply informing you of the timeline you are now working within. What happens after those 96 hours pass without resolution is something you will have to live with. The choice is entirely yours." I found my voice, though it trembled with barely contained emotion. "That money was Grandma's gift to me. She told me about it before she died. She made you promise to keep it safe for my wedding. She was specific. She was clear. How could you just take it and give it away like it meant nothing?" My father waved his hand dismissively, a gesture I had seen 1,000 times throughout my childhood, whenever I dared to express disappointment about being overlooked. "Your grandmother would have wanted us to do what was best for the whole family. She would have understood that Vanessa needs more help than you do. You are marrying into money, Isabella. Ethan's family can easily cover whatever wedding expenses you have." "She would have been devastated," I said, tears now threatening to spill over. "Grandma actually loved me. She actually saw me. Unlike you two, who have spent my entire life treating me like an afterthought to Vanessa." "Do not be so dramatic," my mother said with a heavy sigh, exchanging a knowing look with my father. "We love both our daughters equally. We always have. This is simply a practical decision." Ethan's hand tightened around mine. "We are leaving now. The clock starts the moment we walk out that door. 96 hours. As we turned to go, Vanessa stepped forward, blocking our path to the front door. "You are really going to throw a tantrum over money? Some of us were not lucky enough to land a rich fiancé, Isabella. Maybe try thinking about someone other than yourself for once in your life." I stared at my sister. This person I had grown up with, shared a room with, defended countless times when others spoke badly about her. The sheer audacity of her words, the complete lack of self-awareness in accusing me of selfishness while standing there having just accepted my stolen inheritance, was almost too much to bear. "Move," Ethan said quietly, and something in his voice made Vanessa step aside without another word. We walked out of my parents' house and into the cool Kentucky evening. I did not look back. The door closed behind us with a soft click that somehow felt louder than a slam. Growing up in Louisville, I had always been told to understand. Understand that Vanessa was more sensitive and needed extra attention. Understand that she struggled in school while I excelled, so naturally our parents had to focus their limited energy on helping her succeed. Understand that when there was only enough money for one of us to attend summer camp, it made sense for Vanessa to go, because she needed the social development more than I did. Understand, always understand, that my needs came second, because somehow, in ways that were never quite explained, my sister's needs were more urgent, more valid, more worthy of our parents' resources. The drive back to our apartment was silent for the first 15 minutes. Ethan drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on my knee, a steady anchor in the chaos of my thoughts. I stared out the window, at the familiar streets of Louisville blurring past, trying to process what had just happened in my childhood home. "I should not be surprised," I finally said, my voice hollow. "This is exactly who they are, who they have always been. I have spent 25 years watching them prioritize Vanessa over me, and somehow I still let myself believe that my wedding would be different." "Being unsurprised does not make it hurt less," Ethan replied gently. He was right. Knowing that my parents were capable of this did not diminish the pain of experiencing it. If anything, it made everything worse. All those years of telling myself that things would be different when I was an adult, when I had my own life, when I proved myself successful and independent, they had meant nothing. In my parents' eyes, I would always be the daughter who did not need them, and therefore the daughter who did not deserve them. I thought about my grandmother, about the summers I had spent at her little house near the river on the outskirts of the city. She had taught me to garden, to bake bread from scratch, to play simple melodies on her old upright piano. She had listened to me complain about feeling invisible at home, and she had always made me feel seen. When she told me about the money she was setting aside for my wedding, she had made me promise to choose someone who valued me the way she did. "You deserve to be someone's first choice," she had said, her papery hand clasping mine during one of our last conversations before the cancer took her. "Do not settle for being an afterthought, Isabella. Not in love and not in life. Promise me." I had promised. And I had kept that promise when I found Ethan. We had met 3 years ago at a mutual friend's birthday dinner, and from the first conversation, something had clicked into place. He saw me, not as someone to manage or minimize, not as the lesser daughter who should be grateful for whatever scraps of attention came her way, but as someone whose thoughts and feelings genuinely mattered. When I told him about my family dynamics, he had not dismissed my concerns or told me I was overreacting the way so many others had. He had simply listened, really listened, and then he had shown me through his actions what it meant to be treated with consistent respect and love. Now, sitting beside him as he navigated through evening traffic, I felt the weight of that contrast more heavily than I ever had before. In a single confrontation, Ethan had demonstrated more care for my well-being than my parents had shown in 25 years of raising me. The ultimatum he had given them was not really about the money, I realized. It was about accountability. It was about forcing them to acknowledge, for once in their lives, that their actions had consequences they could not simply dismiss. "What happens after 96 hours?" I asked quietly. "If they do not return the money?" Ethan glanced at me briefly before returning his eyes to the road. That depends on whether they make this right. And if they choose not to, then they will learn that the daughter they have spent years overlooking is not as powerless as they have always assumed. Your father works at Louisville General Hospital, correct? In administration? I nodded slowly, a cold feeling settling in my stomach. He has been there for almost 16 years. It is not glamorous, but it is stable. He is proud of that position. My father sits on the hospital's board of directors, Ethan said calmly, among several other boards throughout the city. I have never once asked him to use that influence on my behalf. I have never needed to. But Isabella, what your parents did tonight crosses a line that I am not willing to ignore. I stared at him, trying to reconcile the gentle man I had fallen in love with against this new dimension I was seeing. Ethan, I do not want you to destroy my father's career over this. Despite everything, he is still my father. I do not want to either, he replied honestly. That is why I gave them 96 hours. That is plenty of time to do the right thing, to return what they took, to acknowledge that they were wrong. If they choose not to take that opportunity, the consequences that follow will be their own doing. Not mine. Not yours. Theirs. We pulled into the parking garage of our apartment building near the waterfront. Ethan turned off the engine, but made no move to get out of the car. The garage was quiet except for the ticking of the cooling engine. Isabella, I need you to truly understand something, he said, turning to face me fully. What your parents did tonight is not just about money. That fund was your inheritance from someone who genuinely loved you. They stole it and gave it to your sister because they have never valued you the way they should. If we let this go, if we just accept it and move on, they will continue treating you this way for the rest of your life. And so will Vanessa. Is that what you want? The moment we walked into our apartment, Ethan made one phone call that set everything in motion. I sat on the couch, still in a daze, listening to his side of the conversation while trying to process the evening's events. Thomas, it is Ethan. I need you to activate the contingency arrangements we discussed last month. Yes, all of it. The venue, the catering, the photography, the florist, everything on the list. We are operating on a 96-hour timeline before we make any final decisions, but I want everything ready to execute immediately, if needed. A pause while he listened. I understand the complications. Work around them. Thank you. He ended the call and sat down beside me on the couch, taking my hand in his. Who is Thomas? I asked, confusion cutting through my numbness. He handles special projects for my father's company. Among his many talents is coordinating complex logistics for corporate events. He has been helping me quietly arrange backup wedding plans for the past 6 weeks. I shook my head in disbelief, trying to make sense of what he was telling me. Backup plans? Ethan, I had no idea you were doing any of this. You never said anything. I know. I did not want to worry you or make you feel like I did not trust your parents. I simply wanted to be prepared in case they did something like this. He paused, his thumb tracing circles on the back of my hand. Your parents insisted on being heavily involved in the wedding planning. Your mother took control of the venue selection, the catering, several of the major vendors. I watched her make decisions without consulting you, override your preferences, dismiss your opinions as though they did not matter. She said she knew what was best, I murmured, remembering dozens of small confrontations that I had let slide in the name of keeping peace. She said a lot of things, but I noticed the pattern, and I decided to prepare for the possibility that their involvement might become a problem we needed to solve quickly. Over the next hour, Ethan explained everything he had quietly put into motion. The original venue was a country club where my mother had social connections, a place she had chosen over my objections because she wanted to impress certain people in her circle. Ethan's backup was the grand ballroom at the historic Seelbach Hotel, one of Louisville's most prestigious venues, already tentatively reserved under his name. The caterer my mother had insisted upon was a friend of hers who charged premium prices for mediocre food. Ethan's alternative was an award-winning chef who specialized in farm-to-table cuisine and had been eager to take on the event. Every single vendor my parents had involved themselves with had a superior replacement waiting in the wings. This must have cost a significant amount to arrange, I said, overwhelmed by the scope of what he had done without my knowledge. It cost money to hold reservations and deposits, yes, but the substantial expenses only activate if we actually use them. And even then, my parents have already expressed their desire to contribute to our wedding. They adore you, Isabella. My mother has told me multiple times that she considers you the daughter she always wished she had. They would be honored to help us create the celebration we deserve. I thought about Ethan's parents, about the warmth and genuine acceptance they had shown me since the very first dinner we shared together. His mother, Grace, had embraced me immediately, asking about my interests, my career aspirations, my dreams for the future. His father, William, had taken time to understand who I was as a person, not just as his son's girlfriend. They treated me with respect and affection that made my own parents' behavior look even more appalling by contrast. I do not want to rely on your family's wealth, I said carefully. That was one of the reasons I wanted to use my grandmother's fund for the wedding. It was mine. It was supposed to be something I could contribute to our life together, something that came from my side. Ethan squeezed my hand gently. I understand that completely. And if your parents return the money within the 96 hours, we can proceed exactly as we originally planned. Your contribution, your grandmother's gift, everything as it should be. But if they do not return it, I refuse to let their selfishness diminish our wedding or our future. We will build something beautiful together, with or without their involvement. I felt tears finally spill down my cheeks. Not from sadness alone, but from the overwhelming realization that I had found exactly what my grandmother had wanted for me. Someone who saw me, valued me, and absolutely refused to let me be treated as less than I deserved. What about my parents specifically? I asked. What happens to them if they do not return the money? Ethan's expression grew serious. Your father's position at the hospital depends on the continued goodwill of several board members, my father among them. That goodwill can be influenced. Additionally, your mother's interior design business relies heavily on referrals from certain social circles in Louisville, circles that overlap significantly with my family's network of friends and business associates. Those referrals can dry up very quickly. You could destroy them, I said quietly, the weight of that power settling over me. I could make things very difficult for them, he corrected. Whether that happens is entirely up to them. They have 96 hours to demonstrate that they are capable of doing the right thing. I genuinely hope they make the correct choice, for everyone's sake. I thought about my parents, about the comfortable life they had built, about the assumptions they had always made regarding their overlooked elder daughter. They had never imagined that I might one day have access to resources and influence that exceeded their own. They had dismissed me as the child who did not need them, never once considering that I might become someone they desperately needed to stay on good terms with. And Vanessa? I asked. What about her? Your sister is a grown adult who made the deliberate choice to accept money that was stolen from you. If she faces consequences for that choice, those consequences are entirely of her own making. I nodded slowly, absorbing everything. Part of me still could not believe any of this was real. But a larger part, a part that had been quietly growing stronger with every dismissal and slight over the years, felt something entirely unexpected. Hope. Hope that maybe, for once, I would not have to be the one who understood. Maybe this time, they would finally have to understand me. The next 96 hours passed with agonizing slowness. I went to work at North Peak Engineering, the architectural firm where I had been employed for 3 years, trying to focus on blueprints and client meetings, while my phone remained conspicuously, painfully silent. No calls from my parents, no messages from Vanessa. No indication that they were taking Ethan's ultimatum seriously or making any effort to return the money they had stolen from me. Meanwhile, Thomas sent daily updates confirming that all backup arrangements remained in place. The Seelbach Hotel ballroom was still available and fully reserved. The replacement vendors were on standby, contracts ready to be signed at a moment's notice. Everything could be switched over with a single phone call, transforming our wedding from my mother's controlled production into something that actually reflected who Ethan and I were as a couple. On the second day, my coworker Bethany noticed something was wrong. We had been friends since I started at the firm, and she knew me well enough to recognize when I was struggling to hold myself together. "Isabella, you have been staring at that same blueprint for 45 minutes, she said gently, pulling a chair up beside my desk. "What is going on?" I hesitated, then told her an abbreviated version of what had happened. Her reaction was immediate and fierce. "They stole your grandmother's inheritance? Your own parents? And gave it to your sister for her wedding while you are supposed to just accept having nothing?" Bethany's voice rose with indignation. "That is absolutely insane. Please tell me you are not just letting them get away with this." Ethan gave them a deadline to return the money, 96 hours. And if they do not, then apparently my fiancé has backup plans I did not know existed, and my parents are going to learn that treating me like an afterthought was a serious mistake. Bethany sat back, impressed. I always liked Ethan. Now I like him even more. Someone in your life should have stood up for you like this years ago. On the third day, my mother finally reached out. Her text message arrived at 2:47 p.m. while I was in a meeting with clients, and I did not see it until almost an hour later. When I finally read it, my blood pressure spiked immediately. "Isabella, you and Ethan need to apologize for how you spoke to us the other night. This situation is getting completely ridiculous. Your father is very upset. Call me when you are ready to act like an adult." I showed the message to Ethan when I got home that evening, holding out my phone without comment. "No acknowledgement of what they did," he observed, reading the text with a carefully neutral expression. "No offer to return the money, no suggestion that they understand why we are upset, just demands for an apology from us for having the audacity to be angry about being robbed." "That is my mother," I said bitterly. "She has never once admitted to being wrong about anything in her entire life. Everything is always someone else's fault, someone else's problem, someone else's responsibility to fix." How would you like to respond? I thought about it for a long moment, turning the phone over in my hands. I am not going to respond at all. They know exactly what they need to do. If they cannot figure out the correct course of action without me spelling it out for them, that is entirely their problem to solve. Ethan nodded approvingly. The clock is still ticking, 47 hours remaining. On the morning of the fourth day, exactly 92 hours after we had left my parents' house, my phone finally rang with an incoming call. It was my father. I answered on speaker so Ethan could hear the conversation. "Isabella." My father's voice was tight, controlled, carrying that tone he always used when he felt he was being unfairly persecuted. "This has gone on long enough. Your mother is very upset, and frankly, so am I. You need to put a stop to this nonsense." "Hello to you too, Dad. What specifically are you calling about?" "About your behavior. About that ridiculous ultimatum your fiancé issued in our home. Who exactly does he think he is, coming into our house and threatening us like that? We welcomed him into this family. We treated him like a son. Ethan did not threaten you. He gave you a timeline to make things right." "Make what right?" "We did what was best for the family. Your grandmother would have wanted us to support Vanessa. She would have understood that your sister needed the help more than you do." I felt Ethan tense beside me, though he remained silent. "Grandma specifically left that money for my wedding, Dad. You know that. You were there when she made you promise to protect it for me. She held your hand and made you swear." There was a pause on the line, just long enough to confirm that my father remembered that deathbed promise perfectly well. "Things change, Isabella. Circumstances change. Your sister needs that money more than you do. Ethan's family is wealthy. They can easily cover your wedding expenses. Vanessa does not have that option. So you are not going to return the money. There is nothing to return. The money has already been spent on deposits for your sister's wedding. Deposits, I repeated flatly. In 4 days, you managed to spend $40,000 on deposits alone? The venue required a substantial down payment to secure the date, and the caterer Vanessa wanted is very exclusive, very in demand. We had to move quickly. Ethan reached over and took my free hand, squeezing gently. Then I think we are done here, I said. Done? What does that mean? Done. Isabella, stop being so dramatic about this whole situation. You are still invited to your sister's wedding, and of course we still expect to be at yours. This is just money. Family is more important than money. You chose money over family the moment you stole my inheritance and gave it to Vanessa without even asking me. We did not steal anything. We are your parents. We have every right to make decisions about family finances as we see fit. It was not family finances. It was my money, my inheritance, my grandmother's gift to me specifically, and you took it without asking, without telling me, and gave it to the daughter you have always preferred. You have 4 hours left. Use them wisely. I hung up before he could respond. The 4 remaining hours ticked by without any further contact from my parents. No frantic phone calls begging for forgiveness. No wire transfer notification appearing on my banking app. No indication whatsoever that they understood the severity of what they had done or the consequences that were about to unfold. At exactly 96 hours from the moment we had walked out of their house, Ethan looked at me across our kitchen table and asked the question I had been dreading. The deadline has passed. What do you want to do? I took a deep breath, trying to find some remnant of hesitation within myself, some part that wanted to give my parents more time, more chances, more understanding. I found nothing but exhaustion and a cold, clear certainty. Make the calls, all of them. Ethan nodded and picked up his phone. Within the next hour, our entire wedding was restructured from the ground up. The country club venue my mother had chosen without consulting me was canceled, deposit forfeited. The Seelbach Hotel was officially confirmed, the grand ballroom reserved under our names. Every single vendor my parents had arranged or influenced was replaced with Ethan's carefully vetted alternatives. The guest list was revised to remove every person who had been invited primarily at my parents' insistence. The new invitations can go out tomorrow, Thomas reported during a conference call that evening. I have the design team standing by. We can have them printed and mailed within 48 hours, or we can send digital invitations immediately if you prefer faster distribution. Digital invitations to most guests, Ethan decided, glancing at me for confirmation. Physical invitations to close family and friends who would appreciate them. And Thomas, make sure to include a brief note explaining that circumstances required us to change venues and that we apologize for any confusion. Understood. And the previous guest list? The people being removed? They receive nothing. No notification. No explanation. They simply will not be attending. When the conference call ended, I sat in stunned silence for a moment. The speed and efficiency with which Ethan had dismantled my parents' involvement in our wedding was almost frightening. In the span of an afternoon, every trace of their influence had been erased. "Are you all right?" Ethan asked gently. "I'm not sure," I admitted. Part of me feels relieved. Part of me feels like I am watching my family fall apart in slow motion. And part of me keeps wondering if I should have tried harder to make them understand. Ethan sat beside me and took my hands in his. "You have spent 25 years trying to make them understand. 25 years of being patient, being flexible, being the daughter who never made waves. What did it get you? A stolen inheritance and parents who still expect you to apologize for being upset about it. I know you are right. It just hurts." Of course it hurts. They are your parents. No matter what they have done, that bond exists. The pain you feel is not weakness. It is humanity. He paused. But pain does not mean you have to accept mistreatment. You can love people and still refuse to let them continue hurting you. The responses to our new invitations began arriving within days. Most of the guests we actually wanted at our wedding were thrilled by the venue change, with several commenting that the Seelbach Hotel was a far more elegant choice than the country club. The people we had removed from the guest list apparently remained blissfully unaware that anything had changed, which was exactly what we wanted. But word travels in families, and it was not long before my parents discovered what had happened. My mother's first message arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. "Isabella, I just heard from your Aunt Margaret that she received a new wedding invitation with a different venue. What is going on? Why were we not informed about this change?" I did not respond. Her second message came 2 hours later. "I tried calling the country club and they said our reservation was canceled. What have you done? Call me immediately." I did not respond to that one either. By Wednesday evening, my father had joined the barrage. His messages were angrier, more accusatory. "Your mother is in tears. How could you do this to your own family? We raised you. We gave you everything. And this is how you repay us?" I showed Ethan the messages without comment. "They still do not understand," he observed. "They genuinely believe they are the victims in this situation. They have always believed that. Whenever I expressed disappointment about being overlooked, they would lecture me about gratitude and family loyalty. Somehow my feelings were never valid, only theirs." On Thursday morning, my sister Vanessa finally weighed in with a lengthy text message that I could barely finish reading without laughing at its absurdity. "I cannot believe you are doing this over money. Some of us were not lucky enough to trap a rich fiancé like you did. Mom and Dad were just trying to help me have a nice wedding since my circumstances are not as privileged as yours. But instead of being happy for your sister, you throw a tantrum and exclude our entire family. I hope you realize how selfish you are being. Real family does not behave this way." I read the message twice, marveling at the complete lack of self-awareness it contained. My sister had accepted $40,000 of my stolen inheritance and was calling me selfish for being upset about it. "Do you want to respond to any of these?" Ethan asked. "No. There's nothing I could say that would make them understand. They have to learn this lesson themselves." Then we proceed as planned. The wedding is in 11 weeks. By then, they will have had plenty of time to realize what they have lost. The days that followed settled into a strange new normal. I went to work. I came home. I helped Ethan finalize wedding details with Thomas and the new vendors. The planning process, which had once felt like a burden overshadowed by my mother's constant interference, now felt liberating. Every decision was ours to make together, based on what we actually wanted rather than what would impress my mother's social circle. But beneath the surface of that new normal, I could feel the pressure building. My parents were not the type to accept being excluded quietly. They were strategizing, regrouping, preparing their next move. I just did not know yet what form it would take. The next escalation came exactly 2 weeks before our wedding. My parents, having exhausted their attempts to reach me directly, decided to go over my head and contact Ethan's family instead. I learned about this when Grace, Ethan's mother, called me on a Saturday morning with barely concealed fury in her voice. "Isabella, sweetheart, I need to tell you something before you hear it from anyone else. Your parents showed up at our house yesterday evening unannounced." My stomach dropped. "They did what?" "They came to the door around 7 o'clock, demanding to speak with William and me about the wedding situation. They seemed to believe that if they explained their perspective directly to us, we would intervene on their behalf and convince Ethan to reinstate their invitation." "Oh God. I am so sorry, Grace. I had no idea they would do something like that." "Do not apologize. You have nothing to be sorry for." Grace's voice softened slightly. "Your mother spent about 20 minutes trying to convince us that you were being unreasonable, that this was all a misunderstanding. that families should support each other through difficult times. She actually had the audacity to suggest that we should pressure Ethan to restore their position in the wedding. What did you tell them? I told them that we had raised our son to treat people with respect and integrity, and that we were proud of how he had handled this situation. I told them that Isabella is already a beloved member of our family, and that we would always support her right to surround herself with people who treat her with the love and consideration she deserves. And then William told them to leave our property and not to return. I felt tears prick at my eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude for this woman who had shown me more maternal warmth in 3 years than my own mother had managed in 25. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you for standing up for me." "Always, sweetheart. That is what family does. Real family." When I told Ethan about the conversation, his expression darkened in a way I had rarely seen. They went to my parents' house. They tried to manipulate my family into pressuring me to change my decision. He shook his head slowly. I gave them 96 hours to do the right thing. They chose to spend that time and the week since trying every possible avenue except actually returning the money they stole. What happens now? Now they face the full consequences of their choices. My father has a board meeting at the hospital on Monday. He was not planning to say anything about your father's behavior, but this latest stunt changes things. I felt a chill run down my spine. Ethan, I meant what I said before. I do not want to destroy my father's career. Neither do I. But there is a difference between destroying someone and holding them accountable. Your father has spent decades believing that his actions have no consequences as long as he can justify them as being for the good of the family. That belief needs to be corrected. True to his word, the hospital board meeting on Monday resulted in a formal review of my father's conduct. Not his job performance, which by all accounts was adequate, but his interpersonal judgment and professional integrity. The review stemmed from concerns raised by multiple board members about a situation involving his family, concerns that my father suddenly found himself unable to dismiss or explain away. He was not fired, but his name was quietly removed from consideration for a promotion he had been pursuing for years. His responsibilities were adjusted, his authority reduced. The corner office he had been eyeing went to someone else, someone who had not recently tried to manipulate a board member's family. My mother's interior design business suffered its own consequences. The social circles she had spent years cultivating suddenly became much less welcoming. Referrals dried up. Clients canceled projects. Invitations to exclusive events stopped arriving. She was not blacklisted exactly, but she found herself increasingly on the outside of communities that had once embraced her. The twin blows to my parents' professional and social standing sent shockwaves through the extended family. My Aunt Margaret called me, having heard a version of events from my mother that apparently painted me as the villain. "Isabella, your mother is devastated. She says you have turned Ethan's family against them, that you are trying to ruin their lives over a simple misunderstanding about wedding funds. Did she tell you what that simple misunderstanding was?" "She said there was some confusion about money your grandmother left, that they were just trying to help Vanessa, and that you overreacted. The money was $40,000 that Grandma specifically designated for my wedding. My parents took it without asking me and gave it to Vanessa. When I confronted them, they told me I did not deserve it because I was marrying into a wealthy family. That is not a misunderstanding, Aunt Margaret. That is theft." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Your mother did not mention the specific amount, or that your grandmother had intended it for you specifically." "No, I imagine she did not. She also probably did not mention that they had 96 hours to return the money and chose instead to spend it on deposits for Vanessa's wedding." By the time I finished explaining the full situation, my aunt's perspective had shifted considerably. She was one of several relatives who reached out over the following days, having heard my mother's version and now seeking the truth. Most of them, upon learning the actual facts, expressed support for my decision to exclude my parents from the wedding. But not everyone sided with me. Some family members believed that maintaining family unity was more important than any amount of money, that I should have simply accepted my parents' decision and moved on. Others thought I was being cruel by involving Ethan's family and allowing consequences to fall on my parents' careers. The division in the extended family was ugly, but ultimately clarifying. For the first time in my life, I knew exactly where everyone stood. No more wondering whether certain relatives actually cared about me or were simply going through the motions of family obligation. The truth was now exposed for everyone to see. "How do you feel about all of this?" Ethan asked one evening as we reviewed the final guest list together. "Honestly, relieved. For years I have been pretending that my family was something it was not. I kept making excuses for them, kept believing that if I just tried hard enough, they would finally see me the way I wanted to be seen. But the truth is that some people are never going to value you no matter what you do. And once you accept that, you can stop wasting energy trying to earn love that was never really available. That is remarkably healthy thinking for someone whose family just imploded." I smiled slightly. "I have a good therapist and an even better fiancé." The morning of our wedding dawned clear and beautiful over Louisville. May in Kentucky could be unpredictable, but that Saturday was absolutely perfect. 74 degrees with a gentle breeze and not a single cloud marring the brilliant blue sky. It felt like the universe was finally aligning in my favor after 25 years of feeling overlooked. I got ready in a luxurious suite at the Seelbach Hotel, surrounded by people who genuinely loved me. My great-aunt June, my grandmother's sister, who had always been more of a mother figure to me than my actual mother, helped adjust my veil with gentle, practiced hands. Bethany from work was there as one of my bridesmaids, along with 2 cousins who had immediately sided with me when the family divide became clear. And Grace, Ethan's mother, had insisted on being present, treating the morning as though she were the mother of the bride. As I looked at myself in the full-length mirror, wearing the elegant ivory gown that I had chosen without any input from my mother, I felt something I had not expected to feel on this day: complete and total peace, not the absence of pain. The knowledge that my parents were somewhere in the city, excluded from this moment, still carried a weight that I could not entirely ignore. The empty space where they should have been was real and present. But beneath that awareness was an unshakable certainty that I was exactly where I was supposed to be, surrounded by exactly the right people. "You look absolutely radiant," June said, her eyes glistening with emotion. "Your grandmother would have been so incredibly happy to see this day. You found exactly what she wanted for you. I wish she could be here to see it." "She is here, honey. In every choice you have made, in every boundary you have set, in the wonderful man you have chosen. She is here. She is so proud of you." The ceremony was intimate by original standards, but perfect by every measure that actually mattered. 80 guests filled the grand ballroom, each one someone who genuinely wanted to witness our commitment to each other. There were no obligatory invitations, no family members included out of guilt or social pressure, or fear of causing offense. Just love, pure and unencumbered by the complicated dynamics that had plagued my family for as long as I could remember. When the string quartet began playing and the doors opened for my entrance, I felt the weight of 25 years of being overlooked lift completely from my shoulders. Uncle Walter, my father's brother who had chosen to support me when the family divided, walked me down the aisle with quiet dignity. The man waiting at the altar was looking at me the way I had always dreamed of being seen. Like I mattered. Like I was enough. Like I was his first choice. His only choice. The person he wanted to build a life with. Our vows were personal. Written specifically for each other over long evenings of conversation and reflection. Ethan spoke about seeing me truly from the very first moment we met. About admiring not just who I was, but who I was determined to become. He spoke about watching me navigate difficult family dynamics with grace and resilience, and how that strength had made him fall even more deeply in love with me. When it was my turn, I spoke about finding in him exactly what my grandmother had always hoped I would find. Someone who valued me, not for what I could do for him, but simply for being myself. Someone who saw my worth even when the people who should have seen it most clearly had chosen to look away. You taught me that I deserved to be someone's first choice, I said, my voice steady despite the tears streaming down my face. You showed me what real love looks like, what real partnership feels like. And you proved that the family you build can be even more precious than the family you were born into. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, the applause that filled the grand ballroom was genuine and joyful. No forced smiles from disapproving parents, no jealous glances from a favored sister, no relatives wondering why they had been obligated to attend. Just the people who actually cared about us, celebrating the beginning of our life together. The reception that followed was everything a celebration should be. Good food, beautiful music, laughter and dancing, and heartfelt speeches from people who knew us and loved us. Grace gave a toast that made everyone cry, welcoming me officially into their family and thanking me for making her son the happiest she had ever seen him. Throughout the evening, I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for my parents to somehow appear and cause a scene, for Vanessa to send another bitter message that would dampen my joy, for something to go wrong and remind me that happiness always came with conditions for someone like me. But nothing went wrong. The evening unfolded exactly as Ethan and I had envisioned, filled with love and joy and the presence of people who had earned their place in our lives. While my wedding celebration continued into the evening, my sister was busy on the other side of the city, crafting her narrative of victimhood. I learned about her social media campaign the next morning, when Bethany texted me screenshots with a message that simply said, "You need to see this." Vanessa had posted a lengthy statement about family betrayal and the pain of being excluded from her own sister's wedding. Her words were carefully crafted to present herself as the innocent victim of my cruelty, conveniently omitting every detail about the stolen inheritance and the ultimatum my parents had ignored. "Some people value money more than family," she had written. "I never thought my own sister would be one of them." Today she got married and deliberately excluded our parents and me from the ceremony. All because she could not accept that sometimes families have to make difficult decisions about shared resources. I am heartbroken that the sister I grew up with has become someone so cold and vindictive. The post had garnered dozens of sympathetic comments from friends who knew only Vanessa's version of events. Several of them expressed outrage on her behalf, condemning me as selfish and materialistic and cruel. I read through the comments with a strange sense of detachment. A year ago, this public attack would have devastated me. I would have felt compelled to defend myself, to explain the truth to every single person who had believed Vanessa's lies, to somehow prove that I was not the villain she was painting me as. But something had shifted in me over the past months. I no longer needed everyone to understand. I no longer required validation from people who had chosen to believe a one-sided story without bothering to seek the truth. "Do you want to respond?" Ethan asked, reading the posts over my shoulder while we ate breakfast in bed on our first morning as husband and wife. "No. The people who matter already know what happened, and the people who believe her without question are not people whose opinions I need to care about." What I did not know until later was that Vanessa's social media campaign was already backfiring in ways she had not anticipated. Several of her friends who had commented supportively on her post had connections to people who knew the real story. Within days, whispers were spreading through Louisville's social circles about the truth behind the family divide. The most significant development came from an unexpected source. Vanessa's fiancé, Gregory, had wealthy parents who had been enthusiastic about the engagement. They had met my parents at several family dinners and had been told that the impressive wedding deposits came from savings that my parents had carefully accumulated over the years. When they learned through the social grapevine that those deposits actually came from an inheritance stolen from me, their enthusiasm cooled considerably. Gregory's mother, I later heard, had very strong opinions about financial integrity and the character it revealed. She was not pleased to discover that her future daughter-in-law had accepted stolen money without a moment of moral hesitation. The engagement did not end immediately, but the foundation had cracked. Within 3 months of my wedding, Gregory's family had pressured him to demand that the money be returned to me as a condition of continuing the relationship. When Vanessa and my parents refused, insisting that the money was already spent and that I did not deserve it anyway, the engagement quietly dissolved. I learned about this development through the family grapevine, through relatives who had once been firmly in my parents' camp, but were now reconsidering their positions as the consequences continued to unfold. I felt no satisfaction at my sister's heartbreak, despite everything she had done. She was still the little girl I remembered from our childhood, the one who had been taught by our parents that she deserved everything and I deserved nothing. Her flaws were not entirely her own making, but I also recognized that I had no obligation to rescue her from the consequences of choices she had made as an adult. She had accepted stolen money. She had publicly attacked me. She had chosen to play the victim rather than acknowledge any wrongdoing. Whatever happened now was the natural result of those decisions. My parents, too, were discovering that actions have consequences that extend far beyond the initial moment. My father's career stagnation had become a source of deep bitterness that was affecting his health. My mother's business had not recovered from the loss of social standing. The comfortable life they had built on the assumption that they could treat me however they wanted without repercussion had proven to be far more fragile than they ever imagined. Eventually, nearly a year after our wedding, my mother reached out with something approaching an apology. "We made mistakes," she wrote in a carefully worded email. "We see that now. We hope you can find it in your heart to give us another chance." I read the email multiple times, looking for genuine acknowledgement of what they had done, genuine understanding of why I had responded the way I did. I found only vague admissions and continued defensiveness. "We were only trying to do what was best for everyone," she wrote. "We never meant to hurt you." They still did not understand. Maybe they never would. The letter I eventually sent back to my mother was the product of weeks of reflection and several sessions with my therapist. I told her that I appreciated her reaching out, but that rebuilding trust would require time and genuine effort on their part. I explained that any future relationship would need to be built on mutual respect, something that had been absent throughout my childhood. I told them I was open to trying, but only if they were willing to do the real work required. I have not heard back from them since. Perhaps they are not capable of the kind of self-reflection that real change requires. Perhaps they are still hoping that time will soften my position, and I will eventually accept them back without any genuine accountability on their part. Either way, I have made peace with the uncertainty. In the 2 years since our wedding, Ethan and I have built a life that exceeds anything I could have imagined during those lonely years of feeling invisible in my own family. We bought a house in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Louisville, close enough to the city for work, but far enough to feel like an escape. Last spring, we welcomed our first child, a daughter we named June after the great aunt who had always seen me clearly and loved me unconditionally. When I hold my daughter and look into her eyes, I make silent promises to her. She will never feel overlooked. She will never have to compete for my attention or my love. She will grow up knowing that she is valued for exactly who she is, not measured against some sibling who was arbitrarily deemed more deserving. My parents have never met their granddaughter. They know she exists, through the family members who still maintain contact with both sides, but they have not reached out to request a meeting. I suspect they are waiting for me to make the first move, to extend the invitation, to be the one who bends. But I have done enough bending for one lifetime. If they want to be part of June's life, they will have to demonstrate that they have truly changed. Vanessa remains unmarried, her engagement to Gregory having ended and no subsequent relationship having materialized. The last I heard, she was working as a receptionist at a dental office, the glamorous wedding she had envisioned having failed to materialize along with the man who was supposed to provide it. I do not know if she has learned anything from the experience. I hope she has, for her own sake if nothing else. My father took early retirement from the hospital last year, his career having never recovered from the board's loss of confidence. My mother closed her interior design business and now spends most of her time at home. The comfortable life they had built has contracted significantly, though they are far from destitute. They have each other, and perhaps that is enough for them. I think about revenge sometimes, about what it really means, and whether what happened to my family qualifies. I did not set out to destroy them. I simply set boundaries and refused to accept treatment that diminished me. The consequences that followed were the natural result of their own choices, their own inability to take accountability, their own stubborn refusal to do the right thing when they had the chance. As my husband and I danced in our living room on our second anniversary, our daughter sleeping peacefully in the next room, I finally understood what my grandmother had been trying to tell me all those years ago. Losing people who never truly respected you is not a loss at all. It is freedom. It is the space to build something real with people who actually value you. It is the peace that comes from no longer performing for an audience that was never going to applaud. The family I was born into had never truly seen me. But the family I built, with Ethan, with our daughter, with the relatives and friends who had proven their loyalty when it mattered, that family was everything I had ever needed, everything I had ever deserved. Looking back on the journey that brought me here, from that devastating announcement in my parents' living room to the life I now cherish, I realized that my grandmother's final gift was never really about the money at all. It was about showing me that I was worthy of being someone's first choice. It was about giving me the courage to finally demand the treatment I deserved. And it was about trusting that when I found the right partner, he would stand beside me and refuse to let anyone treat me as less than I was worth. The revenge I took was simply the act of finally valuing myself the way I always should have,